If you completely surrender to Jesus Christ, if you give him everything you are, everything you have, a battle will come against you. You have got to calculate whether or not you're willing to fight that battle. When you think about a young man or a young woman who enters the military, any branch of the military, what are they saying? They're saying, my life is no longer mine. It now belongs to my country. And when I go to fight for my country, I am willing to give my life if that's what it takes. When you enlist as a soldier in his army, when you enter into that relationship with Christ and you become his follower, you are making that same statement. You are saying, I will give my life if that's what it takes. When we're thinking about the cost of war, we have got to ask ourselves, am I ready for that battle? Am I willing to acknowledge that this won't always be easy, that there will be opposing forces that will come against me? Am I willing to give my life? And sometimes that's a really easy question to answer when everything's going good. When you are having those days filled with sunshine and birds singing, and you don't have any problems at the moment, it's easy to say, oh yeah, Lord, I will follow you wherever you go. I will give my life. But when a crisis hits, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And I think because of that difficulty, we failed at calculating to some extent the third cost that I see in this passage, and it's the cost of perseverance. Jesus says the one who chooses to follow him that doesn't calculate the cost of the tower, he'll lay the foundation and he won't be able to finish it, and everyone who sees him will ridicule him. He ends the passage by this kind of strange reference to salt that seems to come out of nowhere a little bit. And he says, salt is good, but if salt has become tasteless, it becomes entirely ineffective. You are the tower builder. You have to make sure that the foundation that you are laying is strong and that you have calculated the cost of what it will take to finish building that tower. You are the salt. And you have to make sure that your saltness, I realize that's not a word, does not become ineffective, that it doesn't lose its purpose. Persevering in our faith as a follower of Christ will cost us. It will cost us our energy, it will cost us our time, our resources, our talents, our lives. And if I'm just going to be honest with all of you this morning, I have to tell you that as a pastor, this is the part of this passage that concerns me the most. It's the part that I dwell on the most. Because many people have started to build a foundation and haven't calculated the cost. And when the storms of life hit, when the enemy came against them, when things got hard, they gave up. Have you ever thought of what that says to the world around you? Do you ever think about what that says when people go out and they say, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ and I have this great relationship with him and I'm on fire for the Lord and everything's wonderful and this is the best life you could ever have. And 6 months later, they're faced with a health crisis or they lose a loved one, or they lose everything they have because their job falls through, or the church hurts them, and they walk away from God. What does that say to the world around us? He is the only real thing that we have. He's the only thing that we can count on to be a rock, to be a foundation. Everything else in this world will fail you. In case you didn't know that, I'm telling you this morning, everything else in this world will fail you. Your family will fail you at some point. Your job will fail you. Your finances will fail you. A friend will fail you. The church will fail you. I will fail you. But God will never fail you. And if we are saying to the world that he is the rock that we stand on and that he will never fail us, and then when a crisis hits, we walk away, what does that say? You remember that expression, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all? It doesn't apply here. Okay? If you can't finish it, if you can't persevere to the end, if you can't decide in your mind that he matters to you more than everything else, then don't do it. And that might be a shocking statement for a pastor on some kind of platform on a Sunday morning to make. But I'm making that statement because you will put in jeopardy the faith of those around you. And that's a dangerous, dangerous thing to do. You know the story of the hymn, It Is Well? Have I shared this story? Does everybody know this story? Because if you do, I won't share it. Anybody not know the story? Okay. It was a really great hymn. In fact, we've sung it here a couple of times in the past few weeks. And it was penned by a man named Horatio Spafford. He was a very successful lawyer. He lived in Chicago. In 1871, his only son, who was 4 years old at the time, died. After that happened, shortly after that happened, the Great Chicago Fire happened. Everybody remember the Great Chicago Fire? He lost everything. Financially, it ruined him. The fire just ruined him completely. So in 1873, he planned to go to Europe, kind of make a fresh start of things. But he got hung up on some business problems. There were zoning issues that were happening as a result of the fire, actually. So he sent on his wife and their children ahead, their remaining children, their daughters, ahead. Their ship hit a sailing ship. All of his children died. His wife sent a famous telegram that simply said, "Saved alone." He was traveling the same stretch of water when he wrote that hymn. Do you remember the words? "Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." What many might not know is that Spafford would go on to have more children with his wife. In 1881, his wife and him moved to Jerusalem. They actually lost another son after they got over to Europe. But in 1881, he and his wife and their 2 baby girls moved to Jerusalem. They founded something that was called the American Colony, and it was a mission to serve poor people over in Jerusalem. Later on, it would become the topic of a project that would be a Nobel Prize-winning project. He never gave up. Do you want to talk about war? The enemy coming against you. The man lost everything. He lost his money, he lost his children, and he persevered because somewhere along the line he had made a decision in his head that when his heart was hurting, he would still follow. That when the attacks of the world came against him, that when things happen, because we live in a fallen world and things happen that are bad and that are horrible and that are evil and that don't make sense to us, do you think that made sense to him? But when it happened, he was able to write, "It is well with my soul," because he knew the God and the rock that he stood on. And he made the determination to persevere no matter what. When a storm hits and you lose faith, when that battle grows long and you get tired, when the salt loses its taste, I've already said it, you become useless to those around you. Now, in ancient times, salt was used as a catalyst for burning fuel, things like manure. The salt of the time was impure. Sounds a little like us, doesn't it? And therefore, it was susceptible, very susceptible to losing its strength over time. And when it lost its strength, obviously it would become totally useless. Jesus is making the point here that the same is true of a saltless disciple. We need to ask ourselves this morning if we're willing to finish the race no matter what comes against us. If you're close to giving up this morning, if your faith is tired this morning, you might need to ask yourself again, have I calculated the cost of perseverance? Am I willing to go that distance with him? Now, as I was thinking about this message, I was thinking about the fact that I could probably safely say that every single person in this room this morning has made that decision. You've made the decision to follow Christ, to be his disciple. You're not a part of the crowd that Jesus was speaking to that was maybe still on the fence. Some of you might be. I don't know where all of you are this morning. But sometimes it's good to reassess where we're at. Sometimes it's good to take a look inside and to ask ourselves if we've truly calculated the cost of this call. Do you love him more than everyone and everything else in your life? Do you love him more than your family, than your job, than your money, than your free time, your leisure activities? Are you willing to acknowledge that being his follower means that you're involved in a war? And you've got to ask yourselves if you're strong enough to fight that war. Have you calculated the cost of perseverance when the storms hit? If there's a financial crisis in your life, if you get sick, if a loved one dies, if you lose everything. And while I can suspect that almost everyone in this room today, or everyone in this room today, is a Christ follower, I can also suspect that there are many in this room today who are tired, who have dealt with some things, and you're struggling. And your faith might be getting exhausted because the war just has been hitting you every single day, and it's been hitting hard. Then this end this morning is for you. And I'm going to have Mike and the worship team come back up. And as I was just really praying about how to close this service, I just really felt like the Lord was saying, there are some here this morning who maybe don't feel like you're being very effective at the whole SALT thing. You maybe don't feel like your witness to those around you has been as great as it needs to be, or you maybe don't feel like you've been loving others, or you've been loving him. And it happens to all of us. We all get exhausted. We all get tired. There are moments in every one of our Christian walks where we feel weak, and we feel exhausted, and we feel like we just need somebody to encourage us and to pick us back up. So I'm going to have our prayer team come forward this morning. And if you feel like that's you today, if you just feel like you need somebody to pick you back up, somebody to pray with you and to just say together, Lord, we're in this for the long haul, but I need help, then there's people here this morning who are available to pray with you. I just felt like we needed to make that opportunity available this morning. So if you need prayer during this last song, just come forward. The church is supposed to be a place where we encourage each other, where we help each other. You don't have to do this on your own. And thank God for that.